certainly we're going to be polite to all of them, but not going to endorse a candidate. And if a candidate came to one of our rallies, they would not be invited to speak.
And why is that?
Well, because I don't want this to be a political event, in the sense that I don't want people to think that I'm standing on the steps of the capitals, and that's where we're going. We're going to the capital cities. I don't want them to think that I'm there politicking for this person or that person. We're not doing that. This is a campaign for God. We need to get godly men and women to run for office, and we need to get the godly men and women out to vote.
How does this work then? How do you hope that people will express themselves politically? Because in this country, generally politics is expressed through two major political parties. What do you suggest that people do?
I want Christians to consider who they vote for. We look a lot at the presidential elections, and that's where so much of our focus is, especially from the media. But some of the most important elections are the local elections, the mayors, city council members, county commissioners, school boards, how important school boards are. And we need to get Christian men and women running for office. We need Christian men and women not only running for office, but voting and getting behind other Christians that are running for office.
And I take it that your desire for people to vote is motivated by your deep concern, and it just, could you identify the specific reasons that you feel so deeply concerned? Is it the question of same-sex marriage and the whole question of legalized
Same-sex marriage, no question, is an issue. Abortion continues to be a scourge against this country. It's not just one issue. You can't just say this is the one issue. It's a long list of issues. The sins of this nation are great.
Can I ask you a question, though, particularly about the issue of same-sex marriage? And I just find myself asking whether many people disagree with this, but many people draw the analogy to the attitudes that people had about race in an earlier time. And so some say that this is another issue in which,
this is totally different.
Mm-hmm.
That this is God's standards. And just because public opinion may have changed or somebody takes a poll, this is just one of the issues, and it doesn't matter what people say or what people think. It doesn't matter about the opinion polls. It's what God says. And God says this is a sin. And it's a sin against him, and he's going to judge sin.
No, Reverend, forgive me. I just have to, if you do understand, I have to ask. Because it's one of those issues where, for example, Reverend Falwell, who's a contemporary of your dad's, Reverend Jerry Falwell, who's a contemporary of your father's at one point.
And a friend of mine.
Yes, sir. But also at one point called Martin Luther King Jr. a communist, who felt that, and so there were people who would say that this is an issue in which he was on the wrong side of history. And there are others who say now that this is an issue in which many people who share your views are on the wrong side of history. And I have to ask, because they draw the analogy.
The Bible does not say anything about communism, okay? The Bible has a whole lot to say about sex. It has a whole lot to say about homosexuality. And so you can't compare the two and say these are the same. That's just ludicrous. It's not the same.
What are you hoping to happen? What are you hoping will happen as a result of this trip?
I don't believe our country will last the way we know it much longer unless there's a change. And we just continue this moral decline going down. And the only hope, I believe, is God. We just hope and pray that maybe he'll hear our prayers and give us some godly leadership.
That was the Reverend Franklin Graham joining us from his offices in North Carolina. Reverend Graham, thanks so much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
To All Things Considered from NPR News. Did you happen to catch the President's State of the Union address on Tuesday night? And if you did you notice the abundance of high-end suits and shirts, or for the ladies, expensive dresses and maybe some pearls? Now, that expensive style is not reserved for the higher-ups. It is a staple of Capitol Hill culture, from senators and chiefs of staff down to the summer interns. And it's kind of a problem, at least according to a recent opinion piece in the Washington Post by a former Hill staffer. Dr. Philip Lehman is now a cardiovascular fellow at Duke University, but a decade ago he worked as an intern and as a staff member for the House Ways and Means Committee. So we called Dr. Lehman at WUNC in Durham, North Carolina. Dr. Lehman, thanks so much for speaking with us.
Thanks so much, Tricia.
So first of all, for people who haven't visited the nation's capital, or at least were not paying attention when they did, paint us a picture of what a fashion-conscious observer might notice if they were to walk the halls of Capitol Hill as you once did.
So one of the very first things you're told when you work on Capitol Hill is that there's a level of expectation as to how you dress. You're representing a member, a senator, a congressman, and you're expected to be wearing, if you're a man, a suit and a tie, especially if you're in session. For women, something equivalently appropriate. And I think it requires a little bit of a chunk of change in order to fit the part, so to speak. The impetus behind the piece was the fact that I was walking around Capitol Hill, visiting offices, meeting with staffers and interns, and it sort of struck me that, man, everybody looks fantastic. And then I really thought, how is this even possible? And so I really came to thinking, and I crunched some numbers about how much I made when I was a Capitol Hill intern and then a staffer. And essentially, I lived on an almost day-to-day basis and had around $23 a day of discretionary income based on my income of $25,000 a year. So when you walk around and you see people wearing, as I say in the piece, Tory Burch flats, for example, at $225 a pop, who could possibly afford that if you only have $23 a day after just paying something simple like your rent and utilities?
So what's your conclusion about this? You're saying that, look, low wages, high cost of living, and yet people are kind of fancy. So what conclusion do you draw from this?
The conclusion is that at the end of the day, if you're going to dress this nicely and there's this expectation that you need to look a certain part in order to simply just afford the experience, that means one of three things has to be true. Either you have to pick up a second job, you are taking on massive amounts of credit card debt, or perhaps money isn't an issue for you. And if that's the case, then that really has implications for what the pipeline of who works on Capitol Hill in the future looks like. It's a problem because there are probably many people for whom working on Capitol Hill would be the ultimate public service career. And I hate to say it, but they might actually be priced out from the de facto entry experience into that lifestyle moving forward. So you're kind of stuck in a rut. How do you get your foot in the door when you can't even afford the experience?
So what's your solution to this?
The obvious solution, of course, would be to provide a wage that wouldn't effectively prohibit some group of people from having a little bit of a greater chance to work on Capitol Hill. It's not that everybody needs to make a lot of money, but I would hate for anybody to not want to even think about working on Capitol Hill because they know that they just couldn't survive on, let's say, 3 months or even more of unpaid work.
Philip Lehman is a cardiovascular fellow at Duke University. He's a former staff member of the House Ways and Means Committee. He spoke with us from WUNC in Durham, North Carolina. Dr. Lehman, thanks so much for speaking with us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Michelle.
This is NPR News.
We don't fail all the time. The first 2 days work really well.
Behavioral economist Dan Ariely knows exactly why your resolution to get more exercise basically never sticks.
Exercise is good in principle, but it's almost never the case that it's the best thing that you could do right now.
I'm Mary Harris. This month at Only Human, we challenge you to keep your New Year's exercise resolutions, and we help you do it with our Stick to It challenge. Listen and sign up at onlyhuman.org.
WNYC support comes from Manhattan Theater Club, presenting Linda Lavin in Our Mother's Brief Affair, a new play written by Richard Greenberg and directed by Lynn Meadow, now in previews on Broadway. Tickets at manhattantheaterclub.com.
This is All Things Considered here on WNYC. Good evening, I'm Sean Carlson. Brooklyn District Attorney Ken Thompson spoke at First Baptist Church in Crown Heights today. He told the congregation the best way to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is to continue his fight.
Continue to struggle for equal rights, for racial and economic justice, for political empowerment, for social justice.
The church used its Sunday services to focus on community concerns, with U.S. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries also speaking to congregants about injustice in the criminal justice system. Snow is likely for the rest of tonight. It'll be cloudy and gradually clear up overnight. Low around 24 with a wind chill value between 15 and 20. Less than half an inch of accumulation is expected for tonight. For tomorrow, Martin Luther King Day, slight chance of snow. It'll be mostly sunny, high near 29. Wind chill between 10 and 15, and it'll be pretty breezy tomorrow as well. We could see wind gusts up to 34 miles per hour tomorrow. Right now, it's 31 and snowing in downtown Manhattan. You're listening to All Things Considered right here on WNYC and WNYC.org at 540.
Support for NPR comes from member stations and from Inada, Japanese maker of full-body massage chairs, including the Flex 3S, with pre-programmed shiatsu massages and full-body stretch sessions at inadausa.com. That's INADAUSA.com. And Ring Central, a cloud-based business phone system. Ring Central allows companies to add employees or offices as they grow and utilize cell phones and other devices as corporate phones. Learn more at ringcentral.com.
We are WNYC, where New Yorkers turn for NPR News and a whole lot more.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Michelle Martin. We're heading back now to Flint, Michigan, where we have been following the water crisis. You might recall that when the government switched drinking water sources, the number of children with higher lead levels has doubled. That's since 2014. For almost 4 months, people have been told not to drink the tap water because there's too much lead in it. Just yesterday, President Obama declared a state of emergency for Michigan, ordering federal aid for local response efforts. Michigan Radio's Lindsay Smith reports.
Karen Weaver means business. She was elected mayor of Flint in November, and in office, one of the first things she did was to declare an emergency at the city. She pushed for a similar declaration at the state and federal level. Saturday night, Flint City Hall, she shared some good news from the White House.
I just want to say that the president has granted our request for an emergency declaration.
In an odd way, getting this federal recognition is a big win for the city, a validation of sorts. Flint's man-made disaster has been festering for more than a year. The city was being run by a state-appointed emergency manager when they made the decision to get cheaper tap water from the Flint River. After that switch, the state's environmental regulators misdirected city officials on how to treat the water. And when local pediatricians produced data showing more kids were being exposed to lead, state officials initially discredited the findings. The Department of Justice and Michigan's Attorney General are looking into the matter. In the meantime, Governor Snyder has repeatedly apologized to the people in Flint. And true to form, he's focusing on what he calls relentless positive action.
Let's focus in on there's a commitment to solve the problem in Flint. And I sincerely mean that. Hopefully you can see that. We're taking every action that within reason and actually asking people to go beyond reason to help address this question, because this is something nobody wanted to see ever happen, and we're doing our best to take care of it.
Snyder repeatedly takes the time to list the things the state has done since October. Tested the water at schools. State has handed out nearly 50,000 water filters and 20,000 cases of water. But
those actions were not good enough. We've worked hard, but we need to get more connection to the citizens of Flint.
More than 40% of people in Flint live in poverty. Many don't have the means to drive to a distribution center once a week and load a case or two of free bottled water in their trunks. That's why Snyder started sending teams door to door last week. He activated the Michigan National Guard and asked the federal government for help. But that's not enough for many Flint residents. Naraya Sharif was among a couple hundred protesters who gathered outside Snyder's office Thursday. She says the only thing Governor Snyder can do to appease Flint residents is to resign.
This happened under his watch. His agency's covered it up, and he could flush his apology down the toilet because that's all it's worth.
Flint Mayor Karen Weaver told residents the federal emergency declaration means the federal government, not state officials, will coordinate all disaster relief efforts.
And they will continue to assess our conditions and see what needs to happen next. The fight is not over, but this is a huge hurdle that we have surpassed.
The federal government will provide up to $5 million for free bottled water, filters, and water testing kits. But that'll barely make a dent in Flint's long-term needs. Early estimates show the damage done to the city's water infrastructure alone will be at least $760 million. For NPR News, I'm Lindsay Smith.
There's another big health concern that's all over the news, and it's behind this week's Words You'll Hear. That's the segment where we try to understand stories we'll be hearing more about in the coming days by parsing some of the words associated with those stories. Today, our word is Zika. That's the name of a mosquito-borne virus that's been detected in parts of the Caribbean and Central and South America, especially in Brazil, where it's being blamed for a spike in birth defects. The Centers for Disease Control has issued travel advisories for women who are pregnant or planning to become pregnant. On Friday, the Hawaii Department of Health confirmed that Zika caused birth defects in a baby born there. The mother likely contracted the virus on a trip to Brazil. We called Dr. Peter Hotez, Dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine in Houston, Texas.
Zika comes from a name of a forest in eastern Uganda, where the Virus Research Institute nearby in Entebbe discovered the virus from rhesus monkeys in the forest there. So the virus was circulating in Africa. The first human case was in 1954, and no one thought too much of it till it spread to Micronesia and Polynesia beginning around 2007, and now people think it's worked its way around the world to the Western Hemisphere and entered Brazil around 2014, which incidentally coincides with the World Cup soccer game. So some people have alleged that maybe it might have been introduced into Brazil through that route, although it's still controversial.
Why are we so concerned about this?
We've known for a long time that this virus can produce an illness that resembles other viruses transmitted by mosquitoes, which is characteristically a fever and a rash. And then in a subset of people, they can go on to develop more serious illness, and people more or less thought about Zika virus in the same light. The striking thing that happened, though, was when it was announced by Brazilian authorities from the Ministry of Health in October that they've seen this sudden explosion in the number of cases of newborn babies with a horrific congenital birth defect known as microcephaly. These are babies with a small head and small brains who the expectation is they will have long-term serious neurological complications and mental disabilities.
Well, there are health officials in Brazil and in the Dominican Republic, for example, have issued some fairly dire warnings to women who are either pregnant or planning to get pregnant.